Chapter 337. Preparation 3. For the next 2 weeks, Eugene led busy days. He was particularly engrossed in various experiments while keeping Rhaenyra, now more dragon-like than before, by his side. Rhaenyra seemed uncomfortable and restless about the decision, but Eugene didn't release her. Even a hatchling was still a dragon. Though he didn't plan to send Rhaenyra into direct combat as a dragon, he wanted her to assist him in some way while tucked inside the cloak. "Fire," Eugene commanded while lifting the cloak. They had done this dozens of times over the past few days. Rhaenyra obediently opened her mouth, and a scorching breath was unleashed from within the cloak. Ordinary barriers were incapable of blocking a dragon's breath. However, what was cast in front of Eugene was a barrier that Sienna had erected personally. As such, the powerful breath disintegrated upon impact with Sienna's barrier. Perfect. Eugene nodded, satisfied with the results. He never felt a lack of firepower during battles. In fact, Eugene had an arsenal of high-powered weapons and techniques at his disposal. The Moonlight Sword, the Holy Sword, the Dragon Spear, the Thunderbolt, the Demon Spear, and the Annihilation Hammer, 6 high-powered weapons in total. Added to that, he also had 2 techniques, the Empty Sword and Eclipse. His high-powered weapons proved formidable even against the demon dragon Rhyzakia. Ahem. Tempest cleared his throat inside the cloak, signaling that he wanted to express his presence. But although WNYD was also a potent weapon, it lacked the raw firepower of the other weapons. "Hamel, I'm just asking. But you're not thinking of lending WNYD to someone, are you? If you are thinking of doing something like that, you better seal it in the treasure vault instead," said Tempest. "Why? Is there a reason to worry?" Eugene asked. "Didn't you just recently give the devouring sword Asphalt to Scion Lionheart?" "Well, it's because I don't really need the devouring sword anymore," Eugene replied with a somber expression. As Tempest said, he had handed over the devouring sword to Scion a few days ago. The term handing over was a bit of a joke because in truth Asphalt had never belonged to Eugene but to the Lionheart clan. In the past he carried the devouring sword around out of necessity, but now he had no real use for it. The advantage of devouring sword Asphalt lay in its ability to counteract magic, even for non-wizards. Against most wizards, it offered an overwhelming advantage. However, Eugene was now an archwizard and even possessed Akasha, which allowed him to understand most magic. Of course, the devouring sword had other advantages besides cutting through magic. It could cut magic and then absorb the mana used in the cast magic. In the past, when Eugene struggled with the mana drain caused by the Moonlight Sword, he needed the devouring sword to handle it effectively. But Eugene no longer had mana shortages. Regardless of how long the battle stretched on, he would not run out of mana with the help of Prominence, which made use of the Ring Flame formula by drawing mana from his surroundings. Due to this, he no longer needed to use the devouring sword. Scion, on the other hand, relied on Geddon's shield, which consumed a significant amount of mana. Although he had recently climbed to 5 stars, which bolstered his mana capacity, he still couldn't use Geddon's shield indiscriminately. "I gave the devouring sword to Scion because I believed it suited him." The family had agreed and Scion himself wanted it. Besides, the devouring sword was never mine to begin with, so it's not really considered as giving, is it? Is that so? I guess you're right. Hamel, no, WNYD is the same way. WNYD doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the Lionheart clan, Tempest cried out in fear. He was worried that Eugene would lend WNYD to Melkith if he no longer needed it. Eugene chuckled after guessing Tempest's thoughts. "Seriously, all the other elemental kings have made reasonable contracts, but why are you the only one being stubborn? What, are you saying that since the others are crazy I should be crazy too?" Eugene ignored Tempest's outburst and lowered the cloak with his hand. Before the cloak fully descended, Rhaenyra's head plopped out. Her expression showed discomfort. Today she had fired her breath multiple times in a row, which might have been a contributing cause, but her connection with Eugene had also not fully stabilized yet. "I keep feeling waves of benefactor's thoughts," she said. "I told you it would be like this for the first few days. It'll get better soon," responded Eugene. They had to establish a connection of thoughts to receive immediate support during urgent battles. While Mare, as a familiar, could maintain such a connection with Eugene or Sienna without feeling any side effects, Rhaenyra experienced slight nausea from it. "Think of this lady as a good girl. Rhaenyra said weakly. Sure. You should compliment and adore this lady. Sure, Eugene replied accordingly while petting Rhaenyra's head. If Mare were here she would have sent jealous glares, but fortunately she wasn't present. I will leave the various calculations of coordinates and other things to Mare while receiving additional support from Rhaenyra. Eugene thought of his battle strategies. A black dragon could release not only breath but also poison. While Rhaenyra's poison might not be as potent as Rhysakia's, it could still be amusing to use against many demons. Although her draconic. For now, it's stronger for me to cast spells than for her to use draconic. Benefactor, never underestimate the strength of a dragon of this lady, Rhaenyra said, reading Eugene's thoughts. True, I can even use her tail as a shield during critical moments. Stop, don't say such terrifying things. Rhaenyra jumped out of the cloak, tearful and upset. That bastard, Rhysakia, did just fine transforming his arms and legs into his tail and blocking attacks. Can't you do something like that? Asked Eugene. The scales of this lady are not as sturdy as those of the black dragon. And I cannot polymorph as quickly as the black dragon either. Rhaenyra's face turned pale and she staggered back. Eugene felt a bit disappointed and waved his hand to reassure her. There's nothing more to adjust, so go and have fun, Eugene said. Are you sure I can go? Asked Rhaenyra. Yes. The color returned to her pale face. Rhaenyra grinned and pointed toward the mansion. Lady Ancilla said she'll help choose clothes for this lady. Sure. This lady has noticed with her keen senses. Lady Ancilla seems to like me a lot. Lady Ancilla has a fondness for young ones, Eugene agreed. As Eugene thought, Ancilla had taken a liking to Rhaenyra. Just like when Mare first arrived at the Lionheart mansion, Ancilla would give Rhaenyra treats and buy her clothes whenever there was an opportunity. She seems to be getting along well with Sienna too. Eugene found it somewhat surprising that Ancilla and Sienna were getting along so well. He had thought that the two of them would maintain a distance. Was it just his imagination? Lately, whenever he crossed paths with Ancilla at the mansion, he felt an odd gaze from her. Is everything settled now? After Rhaenyra had left for the mansion, Christina, who had been nearby, approached with a smiling face. Yes. The process of reinforcing Frost with the dragon heart they received from Ariardel had been finished a few days ago. Rhysakia's corpse had been completely purified as of yesterday. Eugene had finished making adjustments to the connection between himself and Rhaenyra. There was nothing left to do in the mansion. We can leave tomorrow, Eugene declared. Eugene examined his identification card. It wasn't forged, nor was it a blank one controlled by the Euras papacy. It was a genuine identification card officially issued in Kiel. Eugene had requested it directly from Strahd II. Please. Don't just rush into the palace like this. Even if you are an esteemed hero of the past, there are necessary procedures to meet the Emperor, you know. And, an identification card? Surely it's not for engaging in wrongdoings, is it? I am Hamel and she is Sienna. Why would we do something bad? Then why do you need an identification card? You won't need to worry about it. Just issue it. Unlike 300 years ago in the current era, most people possessed identification cards, and they had become widespread. Without an identification card, one couldn't use the warp gate, and if they failed to present their identification card during inspections, they would be immediately arrested. It made sense. With the installation of warp gates, long-distance travel became incredibly convenient, especially inter-kingdom travel. It would create a chaotic world if anyone couldn't distinguish between citizens and foreigners due to the lack of identification cards. In such a world, fame had too many disadvantages. Eugene, Sienna, and Christina were famous, but their fame had become too overwhelming. Once the three left Kiel and entered Shimuin, the news would immediately spread to the royal family. What would happen next? They would be under constant surveillance or face interference. And most likely even Iris would get wind of their whereabouts. Regardless of how arrogant Iris was, she would try to hide if Sienna entered Shimuin. That was not what Eugene hoped for. The most ideal scenario would be to ambush Iris while she was unsuspectingly committing raids as a pirate. They should catch her by surprise and immediately cut her throat, leaving no room for her to escape. It won't be as easy as we hope, said Eugene. Naturally it won't be, Mare responded with a chuckle from inside the cloak. It's not the first time you've concealed your identity, right? That's right. It was the same when I went to Nahama, Samar, and even Helmuth. I don't know how you acted in Nahama and Samar, but as far as I know in Helmuth, you didn't bother hiding yourself much. You pretended to conceal your identity, but when things got dicey, you revealed yourself immediately. Eugene winced and closed his mouth. It was undeniable, and the same had happened in Nahama and Samar. With Christina's help, he had used blank identification cards, but it wasn't my fault. It was Vermouth's fault. Why are you bringing Vermouth into this? Mare asked. Well, the Lionheart family became so famous because Vermouth raised them too much, don't you think? Yes. If I were born in some ordinary, insignificant family instead of the Lionhearts, I wouldn't need to put in so much effort to conceal my identity, right? Huh? Also, these damn gray hair and gold eyes are too distinctive. They're clear giveaways that shout, "Ah, he's a Lionheart." Yes, well, that's true. And another thing, the white flame formula is also too distinctive. With these characteristics, I can't hide even if I wanted to. I inevitably end up exposing my identity. You're quite something. So in the end, you're unfairly treated, right? Mare said sarcastically. A mocking tone was evident in her voice. Eugene reached into the cloak and pinched Mare's cheek. But this time will be different. This time, it must be done discreetly, and I will make an extra effort to conceal my identity. Iris had been able to expand her pirate operations so quickly because Shimuan allowed her to do so. Iris raided trade ships from other countries and extorted tolls, and those dirty funds flowed as bribes to the Shimuan royal family. The navy, responsible for capturing pirates, did not invade Iris territory as they also received bribes. Shimuan's tolerance of Iris was not solely due to bribes. Shimuan wanted to control the overflowing pirates in the sea through Iris. Additionally, they coveted Iris' power. What Shimuan desired was to trade with Iris and incorporate her power into the nation's strength. Of course, Shimuan didn't achieve the desired relationship with Iris. In the end, Iris completely broke free from Shimuan's control and was now raiding not only foreign countries but also Shimuan's own merchant and cargo ships, as well as facing off against the navy. However, just because they had become enemies didn't mean that all ties between Shimuan and Iris had been severed. Eugene didn't think that was the case. Many of the officials who had taken bribes would have been purged. However, the desire for bribes was insatiable no matter the era. Even if certain officials were prosecuted, there might be others currently accepting bribes from Iris in exchange for providing information. What about targeting the royal family who also received bribes? They couldn't have been thoroughly purged either. If Iris somehow finds out and goes into hiding, it will be quite troublesome. The sea is vast, you know. So this time I will do my best to conceal my identity until the most critical moment, Eugene explained. Indeed. You plan to do so this time. Yes, just like her. Eugene turned his head and stole a glance at Sienna. The remarkable wizard was in front of the mirror, trying to change her appearance by dyeing her purple hair black and altering her hairstyle. You two should change too. Sienna turned her head and suddenly spoke. I did some research and it seems that Shimuan is a nation with a lot of racial diversity. That must be true. It's a place where various knights, mercenaries and merchants gather, responded Christina. Exactly. So we have several options. How about it? Christina, since your skin is fair, why not change it entirely to black? Sienna suggested. What? If you change your skin to black, no one will think you're Saint Christina Rogerus, right? Said Sienna. If Lady Sienna changes her skin color first, I'll consider it, said Christina. Naturally, Sienna had no intention of doing so. She glanced away and examined herself in the mirror. My hair will be black, and what should I do with my eye color? She questioned. Just leave your eye color as it is. There's no need to change it, responded Eugene. Does that mean my current eye color suits me best? Huh? Sienna asked. Yeah, that's right, said Eugene. You answer so soullessly. Sienna pouted and looked back at the mirror. Should she let her hair down or tie it up? She tied it up. What style would be best? Sienna pondered these questions while the carriage continued to move. Finally, the group arrived at Keel's Warp Gate. What will you do about Lady Seal? Sienna had heard stories about Seal from Gilead. Currently, Seal was gaining popularity in Shimuan, leaving a mark under her name. Many knights and mercenaries visited Shimuin due to a unique law in the country. Those who came to Shimuin as knights or mercenaries could register themselves as gladiators. Once registered, they were allowed to participate in the various arenas throughout Shimuin. While some arenas in remote areas may involve lethal duels, most battles in the central arenas resembled a showmanship-filled sport rather than a fight to the death. Although it was considered a sport, winning in the arena required considerable skill. The gladiators' value was determined by the points earned from victories, and their ranking was based on these points. In a way, it reminded Eugene of the hierarchy battles among demons, but unlike the hierarchical system distinguishing demon ranks, the gladiator ranking only applied to those who had registered as gladiators in Shimuin. The higher the ranking, the more benefits one could enjoy. This was why knights and mercenaries from other countries sought to build their reputation in Shimuin. By registering as gladiators, they could accumulate valuable combat experience without worrying too much about death. Shimuin's 12 finest referred to the 12 highest-ranking gladiators. The Silver Lion, Carmen Lionheart's disciple. The youngest among Shimuin's 12 finest. Ranked 7th, Seal Lionheart the White Rose. We should meet her, but it doesn't seem like we can approach her openly. The White Rose, was it? The Blood Lion sounds better. Eugene genuinely believed that. Chapter 338, Shimuin 1. Shimuin, located in the southern seas, was an island nation made up of thousands of large and small islands. More than half of its population and infrastructure were concentrated on the central islands of Shetter and Larupa, so naturally, the royal capital was also located on the central Shetter Island. The same went for Shimuin's warp gates. Apart from Shetter and Larupa, no other island had any warp gates constructed on them. 0. As convenient a service as warp gates were, they were just as expensive to install, and even after installation they required a constant maintenance fee to operate. As such, warp gates were not installed on the other islands that had much lower population numbers than Shimuin's main islands. Under such circumstances, the people of Shimuin were still heavily dependent on maritime trade. Sailing ships were commonly used to trade with the islands that lacked warp gates, but apart from those islands, the ships were also used to trade with the small countries that neighbored Shimuin as well as the savage tribes of Samar. While it might have been better to just install a few more warp gates than to go through such trouble, there was an unavoidable reason why more hadn't been installed until now. 0. This ancient island nation had been founded on the maritime trade long before warp gates had become commonplace, and countless citizens were dependent on the industry. 0. From the guilds of the small shipbuilding firms that made smaller fishing vessels to the guilds of larger shipbuilding companies that made warships and passenger ships, as well as the trading guilds, all depended on the sea. Since countless people would lose their jobs just from the installation of a few warp gates, who on earth would take responsibility for the loss of their livelihoods and push for more warp gates to be installed? Though perhaps they might have a secret set of warp gates for personal use like in Uras, Eugene murmured as he flipped through a guidebook. The Holy Empire of Uras might be recognized by the public as one of the most advanced countries on the continent, but with the exception of the capital, there were hardly any warp gates installed throughout the nation. However, that was only true on the surface. In the basement of the Trescia Cathedral, there was a hidden warp gate that was kept secret from the common people and used only by high-ranking clergy members. The situation in Uras is different from Shimuin. While it is true that Shimuin is a nation made up of thousands of different islands, strictly speaking, the only real territory that they can claim to control is the central islands of Shetter and Larupa. Christina informed him as she leaned her slightly unsteady body against the ship's railing. Uras has a vast expanse of land with their citizens spread all over the place. Ahem. Even if they reject the use of warp gates on the surface, they have no choice but to secretly use them to maintain the spread of their faith. Eugene raised an eyebrow. It seems you're still quite fond of Uras? No, I have no attachment to it. I just feel that you shouldn't be blind to the obvious. I have never once felt any fondness for that country, Christina insisted expressionlessly. In any case, what I wanted to say was that the circumstances of Shimuin and Uras are very different. The upper classes of this country, such as the magnates, the nobles, the royals, or the public officials, have no reason to ever leave Shetter or Larupa. Kaya. Rhaimira, who was next to Christina, suddenly let out a strange cry. Currently, Rhaimira didn't appear to have her usual horn-like protrusions sticking out of her head. Having promised not to do anything strange, Rhaenyra had been let out of Eugene's cloak and was now looking down at the sea with most of her body sticking out over the railing. Look over there. There's a really huge fish," Rhaenyra said excitedly. "Stupid. That's not a fish, that's a dolphin," Mare, who had had her hair dyed black, corrected Rhaenyra smugly while happily swinging her arm entwined with Rhaenyra's. It was as Mare had just said. In the sea below the railing, a pod of dolphins could be seen swimming below the surface of the water. "Jump. Do a jump." The two brats were shrieking noisily, but this didn't cause too much of a fuss as the dozens of other tourists who were currently riding this ship were also pointing at the dolphins and letting out cheers. "Even so, don't you think the world has gotten a lot better compared to the old days?" Sienna asked from Eugene's other side. She had previously given a lot of thought to whether she should tie up her hair, but in the end Sienna had decided to just leave her hair free. 0. While pressing her hand down on her hair, which was fluttering in the sea breeze, Sienna turned to look at Eugene and continued speaking. "In this era, even the ships have gotten a lot faster. When we rode the ship to travel to Helmuth back then, it took us half a year just to get there, didn't it?" "It was around that long," Eugene nodded in agreement as he also leaned against the railing. They were currently riding a cruise ship propelled by a man-powered engine. Even though not much time had passed since they embarked, Shutter Island could already be seen in the distance before they knew it. "Though if we had used a warp gate we would have already arrived by now," Eugene grumbled. Sienna chided him, "Since we're here you should just enjoy the boat ride. Just like Mare is doing, and Rye also says this is the first time she's seen the sea." Eugene muttered, "What's with calling her Rye? Is it the Rye in Reincarnted one?" "Heh." Sienna let out a snort of laughter at Eugene's pun. Christina, taken aback by Sienna's short and inelegant grunt of amusement, looked back and forth between Sienna and Eugene. 1. Was she meant to be laughing now? Should she try to giggle even if it was just for Eugene's sake? The thought did go through her mind, but Christina just couldn't bring herself to laugh. "You don't need to laugh. These two have just got a screw loose," Anise commented with an exasperated tongue click, unable to relate to their sense of humor either. "Rhaenyra takes too long to call out in a hurry, but if we call her Mira that might get confused with Mare," Sienna explained. "This lady really likes the nickname Rye." Rhaenyra, who had been chasing the dolphins with her eyes, also piped up with a giggle. Since they had decided to thoroughly disguise their identities, it was necessary to deal with the issue of their names. Eugene felt the need to say something. "By the way, Sierra." "Yes, Yuri," Sienna responded. "Although it might be too late to say this, aren't the names we picked way too obvious? We've only changed a single syllable," Eugene pointed out hesitantly. "But the new names are pretty common, aren't they?" Sienna argued. "That's true," Eugene nodded before turning to Christina. "Especially yours, Chris. All they had done was remove the last two syllables of her actual name." With a hesitant expression on her face, Christina nodded her admittance. Yuri, Sierra and Chris. Those names really did feel common. While exchanging such trivial chit-chat, their ship arrived at its destination. They were landing at the second largest island in Shimuan, the island of Larupa. As a popular tourist destination, the holy land of prize fighters, Larupa had the largest floating population in all of Shimuan. The reason they had come here was simple. Eugene's goal was to secretly enter Shimuan, figure out Iris movements and find a chance to kill her. In regards to this, the Grand Duke of Shimuan, Ortis, had promised his support, but there was no way they could easily meet up with a high-ranking noble like the Grand Duke just by saying they wanted to meet with him. Though it might have worked if we had sent word in advance, Eugene thought. But they hadn't done so because they were wary that Iris might go into hiding before they even got the chance to meet with Ortis. Fortunately, since Seal had been making a name for herself in Shimuan starting a year ago, by making contact with Seal first, they could request her help to get in touch with Ortis while also investigating Iris' whereabouts. Of course, they couldn't just rely solely on Seal. Before coming to Shimuan, Eugene had also mobilized the Lionheart clan's various connections to find out any information about the Fury pirates that Iris led. 0. In just a few years, those dark elves had managed to unite hundreds of pirate bands that had been sailing the southern seas, both small and large, and were said to have made the Salgarda Sea, the roughest of all the seas, into their base of operations. The Salgarda Sea was also called the Devil's Sea in Shimuan because of the wild ocean currents that swirled there. Even exceptionally experienced and skilled sailors who had lived entire decades on the sea were afraid of going near the Salgarda Sea. But if their sailing skills weren't enough, couldn't they still rely on magic to supplement their efforts? Although anyone could come up with such a simple idea, until now the Salgarda Sea still had yet to be fully conquered. The other reason it was called the Devil's Sea was that magic didn't work properly there. The reason for this had yet to be investigated in detail, but there were speculations that it might be due to certain natural resources buried deep below the sea. Though that just sounds like bullshit to me, Sienna grumbled as she gazed out the carriage window. As soon as they arrived on Larupa, they had taken this carriage and were now heading towards the largest coliseum on this island. Those fools say that a large amount of mana stones must be buried in the seabed and that the mana emitted by those stones is what's interfering with any use of magic. But do they really believe that idea makes any sense? Well, apart from that, they do have several other similar hypotheses. Since natural materials that interfere with magic, while rare, do exist, it may be because of that they can come up with such bullshit, Sienna said with a dismissive snort and a shake of her head. However, when it comes to materials like those, the range in which they are able to limit the use of magic is minimal, right? Eugene pointed out. Let's see now. A Dreate is the most effective of all such materials, but to create a magic-suppressing force field that can cover such a wide fucking area like an entire sea, you would need to replace all the seawater with a Dreate. Sienna recalled something. It said that the sea has a lot of reefs. That's right, Eugene nodded along. Another reason that entire sea is so fucked up is that there are too many small islands within its borders. The large and small islands that dotted the Salgarda Sea were used as strongholds by the pirates. To find out why magic doesn't work well there, we'll have to go there in person to know for sure, but... Sienna hesitated. Well, among all the hypotheses floating around, there is one that I feel may be the most plausible, that the Salgarda Sea was once the lair of a dragon. The hypothesis stated that a dragon may have taken the Salgarda Sea as their territory, establishing their lair somewhere deep beneath the sea or in an undersea cave connected to an island. They then tangled up the sea currents and created a force field that inhibited all magic to prevent any unauthorized access. Although Ariardel said that all the dragons apart from herself went into hibernation, it wouldn't be strange for the magic that a dragon had cast before going into slumber to remain active until now. If there really was a dragon, there must be a staggering amount of treasure piled up in their lair, so the dragon would have naturally wanted their treasure to remain right where it was while they were in hibernation, Sienna surmised. Magic might not work properly in that sea, but it seems that demonies are still usable, commented Christina, who had been listening in silence as she tilted her head curiously. The pirates had succeeded in making that hellish sea their base because of Iris's demon eye of darkness and its power to create a passage from one patch of darkness to another, allowing her to jump over the entire mess of raging sea currents. Demonies are different from magic. They don't even use mana. And even among the demon folk it's a very rare power, Eugene muttered with a furrowed brow. Even back during the war 300 years ago, there were only at most a dozen or so demon folk who were equipped with a demon eye. Eugene further noted, and even among the demonies, Iris's demon eye of darkness and Gavid's demon eye of divine glory are extremely unique, because their powers were granted to them personally by a demon king. Assessing them simply by rank, those two demonies were actually of a higher rank than the demon eye of fantasy. The demon eye of fantasy, as its name suggested, was only able to show you an illusion. It couldn't do anything to actually affect reality. However, that demon eye matched perfectly with its user, the queen of the night demons, Noor Giabella. On top of that, Noor had used all sorts of methods to raise her power level and had trained her demon eye of fantasy to its very limits. Yeah. The sound of cheers echoed through the carriage window from somewhere nearby. What the? Surprised by the cheers, Eugene poked his head out the window to take a look. He saw people waving their arms in the air excitedly from within their carriages and on the roadside. They were looking at a tower in the distance and an image that was magically projected from its spire. Could it be an imitation of the magic screens that were a common sight in Helmuth? However, the screen projected from the spire of the tower was of much lower quality than the one seen in Helmuth, and in terms of quantity, it was also the only one that could be seen. Are you heading over to watch the games as well, dear guests? The coachman holding the horse's reins asked with a hearty chuckle. That sound means the opening match has just started. But well, that match isn't really worth seeing, so please don't feel too impatient. The Mador Coliseum never adjusts the scheduled game times, so you'll have plenty of time to get there. If the matchup isn't worth watching, why are they making such a fuss? Eugene inquired. Ah, that's. As you've been riding in the carriage, dear guests, you must not have seen it. Just now, today's main heroine appeared on the screen, the coachman explained with a bright grin as he turned to look back at Eugene, whose head was still sticking out of the window. It was the White Rose, Seal Lionheart. Eugene's eyes blinked in surprise at the coachman's excited smile. So what the coachman was saying was that the countless people he had just seen going crazy in the streets were all because Seal's face had shown up on the screen? It seems that she's exceptionally popular? Eugene commented. .0. Haha. Why are you asking something so obvious? After all, aren't you also on your way to your reserved seats in the second class, dear guests? Really now, tickets like those aren't just expensive, they're very hard to find. The coachman trailed off jealously. We were just lucky, Eugene said as an excuse. Naturally, it hadn't been luck. They had bought the tickets with a large sum of money. In fact, they could have tried to buy even better tickets with more money, but the best tickets that ordinary tourists could purchase in this city were limited to second-class tickets. Even a first-class ticket required a title of nobility if you wanted to buy it. And as for the VIP tickets, as their name suggested, they could only be purchased by VIPs. .0. Well, the truth is, it's only natural that she can't help but be popular, you know? She's only at the tender age of 18 and with such a pretty face. The coachman trailed off dreamily before snapping back to his senses. Also, today's matchup is crucial for the White Rose. Is that so? Eugene prompted. That's right, the coachman nodded. The White Rose's opponent in today's match is a knight who has also managed to get his name into the 12 finest too, just like her. His rank might only be at the 10th position, lower than the White Rose's, but he's not an opponent that should be taken lightly. The nickname of the knight who currently held the 10th rank was the Iron Wall Knight. .0. The coachman elaborated further. His match points might be lower than that of the White Rose, but today is the first time those two will face each other. If the White Rose manages to win this match, she'll earn the match points she needs to challenge one of the higher ranks. Also, the Iron Wall is equally determined to win. If he loses this battle, his match points will be greatly reduced, and he won't even be able to keep his current rank. While listening to the coachman's explanation, Eugene's eyes were fixed on the screen. Although the coachman had said that this matchup might not be worth watching, that wasn't really the case. It might only be a showdown between two fighters in the top 100 rankings, but it was surprisingly fun to watch. They're not allowed to kill their opponents, Eugene recalled. But the conflict appeared bloody enough, making it hard to believe there was such a rule in place. The matches in Shimuan's coliseums were mainly held for the purpose of providing entertainment. If the fighters weren't able to excite the crowd, they wouldn't be popular no matter how high their match points were. Fighters without popularity wouldn't be able to attract sponsors, and they also wouldn't be able to move any tickets, so in severe cases, they might not even be able to stand inside a coliseum. As a result of that, the fighters had to walk a tightrope at the edge of life and death. As their battle went on, their wounds would only grow in number and their blood would begin to spray out. .0. Dear guests, do you know why Seal Lionheart is called the White Rose? The coachman asked. .0. The Mador Coliseum was just starting to be visible in the distance. I do, Eugene responded. Eugene had already looked into the news surrounding Seal. She had participated in dozens of matches over the past year to rise to 7th place in the rankings. Her record was a whopping 34 wins and 0 losses. The surprising thing was that Seal hadn't gotten hurt even once during her mini-matches. She's grown a lot, Eugene thought fondly. On their way to the night march, he had been attacked by Noir Giabella. Seal and Cyan, who were with him at the time, hadn't been able to put up any resistance against Noir and were knocked unconscious. Eugene was well aware of just how much those two resented that fact. After experiencing the helplessness and humiliation of being unable to do anything, the events of that day brought a lot of changes to the twins. Then those changes had borne fruit in the Samar rainforest when Cyan defeated Hector. Don't look at me. Don't come any closer either. .0. Could that have happened to Seal as well? Eugene recalled how Seal had looked during that moment in the snowfield, her tearful face as she was unable to get over the shame of her own weakness and the words she had spoken in a trembling voice. I never want to experience something like this again. I don't want to burden you either. It's not like I'm an idiot. I'm only saying this after I've worked out my own situation. Why? Do you feel sorry for me because I'm saying something like this? I would truly hate it if that were the case. I don't want to receive any sympathy from you. I don't want to stay around you any longer because it just makes me feel ashamed and embarrassed. If you cling to me and tell me not to go, I will hate you for the rest of my life. Recalling those words, a grin appeared on Eugene's face. Kyowa, 0. The second-class seats in the Mador Coliseum might not be the best seating available, but they were still pretty high-class seats, so it seemed like there wouldn't be any huge issues with enjoying the match from here. The match hadn't started yet, so the only thing to look at right now was the waves of white roses filling the stands. The White Rose. Seal Lionheart. The shouts of her name and title could be heard coming from all directions. Seal's fans were all wearing matching white clothes and were tossing around the petals of Seal's nickname, the White Rose. The same thing was happening in the higher-class seats, which were closer to the field and had even better views. Moreover, among the VIPs who only numbered in the bare dozens, a few could be seen holding white roses. Ortis isn't here, Eugene noted. If Ortis had come to watch the match, Eugene had been planning to try and make contact with him somehow. While feeling some disappointment at the missed opportunity, Eugene leaned against the railing. I've never met that young lady Seal before, so what type of person is she? Sienna asked as she held Mare up slightly so she could get a better view of the field. You'll know once you meet her, Christina said as she, seemingly out of a refusal to lose, also lifted Rhaenyra up for a better view. Thanks to this, Eugene, who was caught between them, couldn't help but feel slight distress. 0. 2 grown women with children and 1 man standing between them. Eugene was afraid of what he must look like in the eyes of others, especially in Carmen and Seal's eyes. What on earth is going on? Mare won't tell me anything and you're not saying anything either. Chris, just what aren't you telling me? Sienna demanded. Christina seemed to prevaricate. Haven't you seen Sir Cyan? Of course I've seen him, Sienna confirmed. He's quite cute and like a baby. Since they're twins, she looks similar. As for her personality, Christina paused before clearing her throat. Ahem, she's also adorable. The reason Christina refused to say anything about Seal was that she honestly had no idea how to introduce Seal. In particular, Christina was concerned about Seal's feelings for Eugene. She couldn't decide just how sincere Seal's feelings for Eugene were, so Christina thought it would be better if she didn't comment on it at all. Here they come, Eugene announced, pointing a finger at the arena. The closed doors on one side of the field were thrust open. The first person to come through those doors wasn't Seal but instead Desra. Marching into the field ahead of Seal, Desra raised her hand, and a white carpet rolled out from the open doors. The pure white path created by this carpet led straight to the center of the arena. After checking to see that the carpet had rolled out evenly without a single wrinkle, Desra spun around gracefully and dropped down onto one knee. Click, click, click. 0. Light footsteps could be heard coming from the open doors. Ewa. The crowd let out a cheer so loud it made their eardrums hurt. The white roses the spectators had been waving were all thrown into the field in one motion. Large roses fell into the middle of the arena, which was already covered with the flowers' petals like snowflakes. They'll have to clean that up before the match, right? Sienna muttered as she watched the flowers pile up on the field, leaving no room to even take a step. Of course, all of those petals and roses would be cleaned up before the match by wizards stationed in the corners of the arena so they wouldn't interfere with the match itself. Eugene stretched out his hand and caught one of the roses pouring down like rain as he watched Seal walk through the doors. Seal wore a pure white outfit different from the dress uniform she had worn as a member of the Knights of the Black Lion, but it had the same Lionheart sigil embroidered on her left chest. Seal responded to the cheers with a bright smile and waved her hand at the spectators as she walked down the carpet. Eugene unconsciously let out a pleased hum as he took in her appearance. He felt the urge to make a comment about how Seal really had grown up. Chapter 339, Shimuin 2. Bonus image. Ranked 10th, the Knight of the Iron Wall was the perfect match for Seal. Standing over 2 meters tall, clad in thick armor, he appeared 3 times larger than Seal, exaggeratedly so. He wielded a massive shield that could cover his entire body and held a large lance in the opposite hand. Block with the shield, thrust with the lance. It was a simple yet intricate technique. He lived up to his name as the Knight of the Iron Wall. He deliberately hid behind his shield while waiting for Seal to approach. However, he wasn't actually an iron wall and was no match for Seal. The battle itself didn't take long. The sword force that Seal's slender rapier emitted was sharp and swift, and with her dazzling swordsmanship she literally disassembled her opponent. No blood was shed. In an instant, dozens of precise attacks tore through the thick armor of her opponent like paper. Within a few minutes, Seal's opponent was left only in his undergarments, wearing nothing but a helmet. White Rose. Seal Lionheart. The judges declared Seal's victory. A crushing result. Desra approached Seal and handed her a sheath for her sword. Seal sheathed her weapon in front of everyone, then smiled and waved at the crowd before turning her back on her defeated opponent, after which Desra opened the door for her. Once again, a white carpet rolled out onto the ground. Seal waited until the carpet reached her feet before waving goodbye to the audience with a beaming smile and exiting the arena. "How long did that take?" Seal asked. "About 8 minutes and 43 seconds, Desra answered while following behind Seal. Adding the time for the post-match greetings, around 13 minutes. It was supposed to be a meaningful match. Should I have stayed until the 10-minute mark? Maybe I should have waved for a bit longer to the fans." Despite maintaining a smile for the audience, Seal's expression now seemed apathetic. The goal had been to defeat her opponent within 10 minutes. She did it with ease, but honestly, she didn't enjoy the content of the match. What fun was there in unilaterally cutting down an opponent who only focused on defense? "What about Lady Carmen?" asked Seal. "She didn't come because she said there's no value in watching predictable matches," responded Desra. "It was indeed a match not worth watching," grumbled Seal. "The next one will be different, right? You've accumulated enough points to challenge the higher ranks, haven't you? Surely you're not thinking of giving up on that?" asked Desra while approaching Seal and brushing a rose petal off her shoulder. Seal looked up at Desra and smiled brightly. "The top 6 are half of the 12 finest, right? They're considered the real deal. Since I made it this far, I might as well try to challenge them," said Seal. There was no guarantee of victory. Even if she won, there was no guarantee she could win as flawlessly as she had so far. But Seal was not afraid of that. She had traveled to Shimuin for the purpose of training. In the past year she had fought 35 battles, all victorious and without a single scratch. It had not been easy. To win without injury, Seal wielded her sword every day without rest and thoroughly researched her opponents once the matches were set. Desra honestly admired Seal. Despite being only a year older, Seal's skills had reached a level Desra could never catch up to. It wasn't like this at the night march, thought Desra. 4 years now, she had been observing Seal's growth by her side as her aide. Seal had never been one to slack off in her training, but over the past year, it was as if she had transformed into a different person, devoting herself entirely to her sword. Although her white flame formula remained at the 4th star, her swordsmanship had grown exponentially compared to before. "Oh, and Lady Seal, Marquis Lebrun has sent an invitation through an aide inviting you for a meal. He is adamant about it," Desra said suddenly. "Why should I have a meal with that old man? I can already predict what he'll say. He'll sponsor me if I fight just once in his private arena, right?" Seal dismissed the invitation immediately. "Well, Camaro Arena is quite prestigious. It wouldn't hurt to have a match there," said Desra. "If I want to expand my connections, I might consider it. But why would I bother making more connections now? I'll be leaving in about a year at the latest," said Seal. There was less than a month left for this year to end. According to her initial plan, Seal had intended to leave Shimuin before her 22nd birthday. Now she felt a hint of regret and clicked her tongue. "April. Can I make it into the top 5 by then?" She had received a letter from the Lionheart's main family. Her brother Cyan and Eugene had returned not long ago. There had been a war between the native tribes in Samar, and Eugene and Cyan had participated in it. Cyan had killed Hector Lionheart, the traitor of the family, during the war. That fact alone was enough to shock Seal, but the content of the letter that followed was even more shocking, enough to make her forget everything written before. Eugene had killed the demon dragon Raizakia. That news only fueled Seal's determination further. She was the youngest of the 12 finest, ranked 7th. It was an honorable position, but compared to Cyan and Eugene, it was lacking by far. She wanted to climb higher, ideally within the top 5. Humph. Seal lifted her gaze slightly, snapping out of her thoughts. It seemed that fool Desra hadn't noticed anything. Desra blinked a few times when their eyes met before giving a silly smile. That silly smile felt pathetic, and Seal slapped Desra's but with a wide-open palm. "Ouch. What was that for?" shouted Desra. "Stupid Desra. You don't know why I hit you?" asked Seal. "Well, it's not like it's the first or second time you've hit me. How should I know? You probably hit me for some silly reason, like you not liking how I looked at you. Respecting someone didn't mean you couldn't retort towards them." Desra was used to Seal's scolding, so instead of feeling down, she glared back at Seal with determination. "Pitiful." Seal clicked her tongue and shook her head. There was no need to explain if Desra couldn't realize it on her own. Seal landed another firm slap on Desra's butt. "I'm going to stop by somewhere, so you go ahead," Seal said. "Where are you going?" Desra asked. "It's my freedom to go wherever I want. Besides, I don't have anything else scheduled. But Marquis Lebrun specifically invited us for a meal." "I already gave my answer. I won't eat with him. If he insists on having a meal, you can go in my place." "I don't want to eat with that creepy old man either. Every time I cross paths with him, he looks at me with filthy eyes." Desra shuddered involuntarily. "That's because your butt is unnecessarily big. You eat several bowls of rice at every meal, so of course you're gaining unnecessary weight." "Gaining weight? There's no unnecessary fat on my body. It's all muscles." Desra's shoulders trembled. She felt genuinely wronged. But since Seal had no intention of trying to understand Desra's feelings, she simply slapped Desra's butt once more. "Get going already," said Seal. "Ugh. Can't you at least tell me what business you have? All you do is hit me all the time." Desra grumbled before passing by Seal. The attendants looked at Seal for guidance. They had been following behind the two while holding the large carpet. "What are you waiting for? You should go too," said Seal. "Yes, Lady Seal." The attendants hurriedly followed Desra. Soon they disappeared through the door at the end of the hallway. "Humph." Once Seal was completely alone, she snorted and gripped the hilt of her sword at her waist. "I'm alone now. Isn't that enough?" Seal spoke while slowly turning in a circle on the spot, her hand remaining on her hilt. The attendants and even stupid Desra had not noticed, but Seal's keen senses could detect a hidden presence in this space. It was rare, but it had happened a few times before. As a famous celebrity in this country, Seal attracted various people with malicious intentions. The perpetrators included mediocre gladiators who lacked points and desperately wanted to defeat Seal Lionheart. Even though they were resorting to cowardly ambushes, they desperately sought the fame that they would garner from beating Seal Lionheart. Then there were other types of people who were after her as well. Occasionally, some would come seeking revenge after being defeated in a duel. Some even sent assassins to avoid dirtying their hands. In the past, even a top-ranked fighter had sent an assassin before their fight. They had been afraid of fighting against Seal. Of course, no such attempt had ever succeeded. Seal believed it would be the same this time. Who could it be this time? An assassin sent by the Knight of the Iron Wall? Or just some naive fool seeking fame? It could well be one of those cowardly nobles I rejected. In this kingdom, many fans supported Seal, but equally numerous were her foes. In particular, there were many nobles and fighters who wanted to become involved in a scandal with Seal at any cost. Naturally, Seal had no such intentions, so she always brushed off offers to share a drink or dance at parties. She treated any such propositions with curt rejections, cutting them away as if she were swinging a sword. "How long do you plan to hide?" Seal narrowed her eyes and unsheathed her sword. She was certain someone was hiding nearby, but the exact location eluded her. This fact put her slightly on edge. The opponent seemed like an exceptional assassin or a wizard. Or perhaps it's just as well. Otherwise, it would have lacked the thrill of combat. Sending Desra and the attendants ahead had been a wise move. She activated her white flame formula. Whoosh! Faint white flames enveloped Seal's body. At that moment, something whizzed through the empty air. Seal reacted instantly. She didn't care what was flying towards her. She swung her sword with precision. The distribution of speed and power was perfect. However, she couldn't cut through the projectile and instead was stopped in her tracks. The scenery before her distorted, and a faint scent of roses tickled Seal's nose. It was a fragrance she was too familiar with. The moniker White Rose, given to Seal was, to a large extent, a self-imposed name of which she had never felt embarrassed or ashamed. When she first became a gladiator and stepped into the Colosseum, Seal appeared in a snowy white uniform with a white rose pinned to her hair. She had Desra scatter white rose petals. There were reasons she chose a white rose among all other roses. Amidst the blood-soaked Colosseum, red was too common a color. By choosing a white rose, symbolizing purity in the midst of that chaos, she believed it could easily garner the audience's attention and favor. Thus, Seal bestowed the title White Rose upon herself. What was the essence of the ranking system in the kingdom of Shimuan? Why did fighters in this country attach a moniker before their names? It was to gain fame, of course. In addition to skill, fame was necessary to attract attention. Seal understood well that an easily immersive and endearing image was required to create that fame, something that the audience could easily remember and chant. It had not been a difficult task for Seal. Ever since she was young, she had been well versed in ways to win favor and receive affection from others. "Ah, you surprised me." She was familiar and well practiced, but she had yet to elicit the reaction she desired from absolutely everyone. She had never experienced the genuine reaction she longed for, not when she was a mischievous little girl, not when she grew older and felt genuine embarrassment, and not even after she came to understand her own emotions. "Why do you look like that?" said Eugene Lionheart. He was the adopted son of the main family, a distant cousin of hers. They had become siblings since they were young, and she had been content with that alone. She remembered teasing him in the past, telling him she was his older sister since her birthday came before his. From some point on, perhaps when she reached adolescence, Seal had disliked the fact that they were siblings. Why she disliked it, even she couldn't understand it back then. He just didn't like it. Now she understood the reason for that long-held dislike. Well, she understood it anew. The essence of that emotion was something she had understood not just now but several years ago. You. For that reason, Seal could not keep her expression under control. She hadn't prepared herself for today's encounter. He had never even imagined it. Seal widened her eyes, and her gaping lips refused to close as she stared at Eugene. "You seem quite surprised," Eugene chuckled as he lowered his index finger. As it descended, Seal's sword was lowered as well. "Even so, how could you swing your sword right away? You almost cut the gift I prepared." To call it a gift would be an overstatement, as it was just a rose he had picked up from the shower of petals that had rained down on the Colosseum. Should he have prepared a more convincing gift? Eugene felt a tinge of regret as he extended the rose towards Seal. "Here." Still, Seal continued to stare wide-eyed and open-mouthed without any response. Her shock stoked an urge within Eugene to tease her. He chuckled while playfully pushing the rose into her open mouth. "Pff." It was only then that Seal regained her senses and spat. Clang. Her hand was rather unsteady as she dropped her sword to the ground. Startled, she stepped back and pressed against the wall, staring at Eugene's face in shock. You. Just say it once." "I'm glad to see you too, but isn't your reaction a bit too extreme, Seal Lionheart?" Why are you here?" "I received a letter saying you were at the main house 3 days ago." "Just because I was at the Lionheart mansion 3 days ago doesn't mean I have to be there today as well. Don't you know my personality?" "But no. You leave the main house and go all over the place whenever you have something to do." Seal belatedly composed herself and smoothed her expression, although it didn't quite go as planned. She managed to reel in her expression, though her startled heart continued to race. "Could it be that you came all the way here to see me?" she asked. Well, Eugene hesitated a bit. "That would be impossible. I know you're not that kind of person." Seal gave a playful laugh and stepped away from the wall. She accepted the rose that was almost touching her face and stared intently at Eugene's face. She only now realized that Eugene's appearance had changed slightly, though it couldn't be considered drastic. His ash-gray hair and golden eyes had turned brown. That was the extent of the change. It was a change she could recognize at a glance, and that's why she was amazed. Why would he change the color of his hair and eyes? If he came to see her, there was no need for such a thing. To surprise her? Impossible. Seal knew Eugene all too well. Although she felt a hint of bitterness deep within her heart, such a trivial thing did not change the feelings of her heart for him. "Still, thank you," Seal grinned and placed the rose in her hair. With graceful steps, she approached Eugene. You came to watch my match, right? Whatever the reason for you being in the Shimuin, this is enough for me. With arms wide open, Seal pulled Eugene into an embrace. Thank you for coming, and it's been a while, Eugene, she said. It was okay to embrace her sibling after all, but she still disliked the fact. Still, she liked that she could use it as an excuse to embrace him just a little. The hug ended much too quickly. Seal nonchalantly took a few steps back, only to belatedly realize that she had just finished a match. Suspicion crossed her mind, and she gave Eugene a scrutinizing look. Do I smell of sweat? She asked. I don't think so. It was an honest answer. At the moment, the only fragrance surrounding Seal was the faint scent of roses. Seal focused on Eugene's expression before nodding with relief. All right, anyway, we can't stand here talking forever. What should we do? Shall we go together? Asked Seal. I have my own group. Group? Seal naturally thought of Christina, the saint. Of course he had a group. Seal narrowed her eyes and looked at Eugene. Where are they? She asked. They're probably still in the audience. Then, good. Seal reached into her trouser pocket and pulled out a thick notebook and a pen. The items looked a bit bulky for the trousers, which looked to be a tight, perfect fit. At a glance, it seemed like the notebook had been opened and closed hundreds of times. What's that? A diary? Asked Eugene. I write diaries, and various other things. What? Curious? Asked Seal. And if I read something I shouldn't? Said Eugene. I don't write anything weird, so don't worry, retorted Seal. A simple diary, information about her opponents. Those were the kinds of things she wrote in the notebook. Eugene smirked and leaned against the wall. Well, I thought it could be poetry, said Eugene. You really think I'm full of emotions like that? Seal chuckled and quickly scribbled on the notebook, then tore out a sheet of paper and handed it to Eugene. It's the address where I'm staying. There's security, but with your skills there shouldn't be any problems. So find your own way there. You're not even going to leave the door open? Do you really want me to do that? I get quite a bit of attention from here and there. If I do something unusual, the paparazzi guarding the mansion will write all sorts of stories in the newspapers. Is that all right? She never felt that he lacked common sense. Based on the fact that Eugene was in disguise and that he had only shown himself when she was alone, it would be best to keep their future encounters a secret as well. I'll be there tonight then, replied Eugene, putting the note into his pocket. Seal nodded before spinning around. Tonight. See you later. She made sure not to put too much emphasis on her words. Something like that would feel too clingy. If anything, Seal wanted to show Eugene a haughty demeanor.